coordinator for this series, Rahul Maliwal, Abhishek ji, and my dear friends. Let's start the session with ICI motto. Request Sejal bhai to start ICI motto. Shehzad bhai? हाँ.
य एष सुप्तेषु जाग्रति य एष सुप्तेषु जाग्रति कामं 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 कामपुरुषो पुरुषो निर्मिमाणः निर्मिमाणः तदेव शुक्रं तदेवामृतमुच्यते तस्मिन् लोकः शितः सर्वे तदूनात्यपि कश्चन एतद्वैता 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 एतद्वैता.
Thank you. Request our chairman, CA Harit Dhariwal, to share keynote address.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Yes.
So respected faculty for the session, Dr. Paresh Dave sir, Rashid Jain, managing committee members, here Rahul Maliwal, Bishan bhai, the coordinator here, Abhishek Chopra bhai, and all the dear friends. A very good evening to everyone. I think currently we are just at the vaccination drive, but I'm sure it's very good to see all the enthusiastic participants join this wonderful course on customs. And today I'm very sure that Dr. Paresh Dave sir is going to enrich yourself on the customs valuation and other aspects. And thank you so much, sir, for sparing a valuable time. We are very happy at Ahmedabad branch to have you. I would now request the Vice Chairman, C. Bishan Shah, to share a few words.
Good evening, all, and it's a great pleasure to hear Advocate Paresh Dave sir, because he's a legend and a stalwart when even in some of the great judgments of Gujarat High Court and in CSTAT also, we seen him. And sir, we are proud that you came on our platform and you are going to share the knowledge, because we all are much more requiring the knowledge for the customs. So thank you very much. And now I request CA Rahul Maliwal to take it forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Faculties of the today's session, Advocate Paresh Dave sir, the dynamic chairman of Ahmedabad branch, C. Harit Dhariwal, the secretary of Ahmedabad branch, C. Anjali Choksi, the vice chairman, C. A. Bishan Shah, the managing committee members, C. A. Sunil Bhai, and the coordinator of the session, Abhishek Ji Chopra, and all the dear participants. Welcome you once again in this third day of the series. And today, the topic is the litigation and the controversy in the Indian custom. And I'm very sure, and you all will be agreed, that Paresh Dave sir is only the person that who can deliberate and who can give the justice to this particular topic. The sir is having the vast experience and the knowledge. We all are very blessed that sir is today with us to deliberate on the topic. Now I'll request C. Abhishek Chopra to give the brief introduction of the sir. Thank you so much, sir, for being here. Thank you, sir.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
As Bishan Bhai and Rahul ji said, sir, our today's faculty, Sri Paresh Dave sir, doesn't need any introduction. Those who are doing practice in Ahmedabad and Gujarat at large knows personally sir very well. Although most of them have not met the sir, but sir name is known to everyone because there are various landmark judgments which is in the credit of sir. Sir is having the experience of over 3 decades in indirect tax. Sir, main practice area is customs, central excise, service tax and GST. Sir has argued before various high courts and Supreme Court also as well. Sir has also argued various constitutional matters. Sir is the founding member of the Service Tax State Bar Association founding member. Sir is a regular contributing the article in Sandesh newspaper from last 15 years. And Sir has published, Sir articles is published in various leading tax newspaper and publication as well on various issues which we are facing day in, day out. And as Rahul said, our today's topic is controversies and litigation surrounding customs. Sir, first of all, customs is new to most of the chartered accountant. It is we are not well versed like GST. In so far as compliance and consulting part is concerned, the CS knows about GST, but custom they are unaware. So what today's request is, and that's why we have approached you to kindly enlighten us with your experience and latest controversies surrounding customs, which we are actually facing day in, day out, including 9610 and recent judgment delivered by Supreme Court with respect to proper officer at DRI cannot issue so cause notice. With these words, I request sir to take this session forward. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. All the members of Ahmedabad branch of WRC of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, dear friends and colleagues, I thank you all for inviting me today in this workshop. The subject of our discussion today is litigation and controversy under the customs laws. This is a very wide subject. Controversies and litigation ordinarily go hand in hand, because when there is a controversy about application of any law, there is bound to be a litigation. The list of controversies and litigation under the customs laws can never be exhaustive, because several controversies and litigation under the customs laws are still unresolved, and new controversies and litigation keep on arising as time progresses. Therefore, let us confine this discussion to the controversies and litigation affecting the industry today. As Sri Abhishek Chopra said, we'll discuss the raging controversies today, because otherwise controversies come, go, and controversies are perpetual. But let us confine the discussion today to the controversies and litigation affecting the industry today, because any controversy affecting the industry would ultimately land up before the professionals like us for advice, consultation, and ultimately resolution through litigation. The background of the customs laws and the objective of such laws are important. As Sri Abhishek Chopra said, many members may not be very conversant with the Customs Act. So therefore, let us begin with the background of the customs laws, because controversies under any law are many a times resolved keeping in view the background and the objects of the concerned law. Before the Parliament enacted the Customs Act 1962 and made it applicable from 1st February 1963, the Sea Customs Act and the Land Customs Act were made applicable to certain parts of our country by the British Raj. In 1947, that is at the time of independence, Imports and Export Control Act 1947 was enacted, and ultimately for consolidating and amending the law relating to customs, the presently applicable Customs Act has been brought into force. The object of the Customs Act was to regulate the import and export of goods into and from the shores of India, from the borders of India, and to determine the customs duty payable. The lacuna of the provisions of the Sea Customs Act and the Land Customs Act were attempted to fill, whereas the difficulties emerging over the years due to the changing conditions were sought to be countered by enacting the new law. At that time, in 1962-63, smuggling was a great menace, a great threat to the country, and therefore detection of smuggling activities by conducting search, seizure, confiscation, etc. of the smuggled goods was also one of the objectives. Also, the powers of arrest and detention of the persons engaged in smuggling activities or abatement of smuggling. The problem today is that the customs laws are made in year 1962 for detecting and controlling smuggling and such other illegalities of that time. But the general situation and also the economic conditions in our country, as well as in foreign countries, have undergone a fundamental change after 1963 and 1962. But such changes and the lacuna now being felt in respect of the provisions of the customs laws are not remedied for a long time. A complete overhaul of the Customs Act is now long overdue for our country. So we will discuss today how the expectations of the trade and the citizens of the country for the customs laws are not met, and how the trade and the citizens sometimes feel upset and also harassed by the customs agencies like Directorate of Revenue Intelligence at present. The object of regulating import and export of goods is also no longer relevant so far as the Customs Act is concerned, because the Parliament has made other laws specifically for regulating import and export of goods as well as services. The Foreign Trade Development and Regulation Act is one such statute enacted only for the purpose of making provisions relating to imports and exports. Foreign trade policy, also called EXIM policy, that is export import policy, is formulated under the Foreign Trade Act for regulating the imports and exports. Various schemes for regulating imports and for promoting exports are framed under the foreign trade policy. But provisions of the customs laws are relevant for matters under the Foreign Trade Act and foreign trade policy also. The Parliament has made Special Economic Zones Act for promoting exports. But there also, the Customs Act is supplementary, and some controversies and litigation involve matters under the Foreign Trade Act and the SEZ Act also. On transactions relating to imports and exports, now integrated tax, that is IGST, is levied and collected under the new GST laws. And therefore, there are controversies and litigation involving officers of the Customs Department. As Sri Abhishek Chopra said, Rule 96, Sub-Rule 10 is the raging controversy today with regard to the IGST and customs law litigations. The main object of the Customs Act now is generating revenue for the state by way of collecting customs duties. Customs Act is therefore a taxing statute. What is the root cause of controversies and litigation under any taxing statute? Obviously, the revenue officers make all attempts to collect more revenue for the state, whereas the citizen would always like to take all available benefits for reducing the tax burden on him. This eternal tug of war between the taxpayer and the tax collector is the main reason for controversies and litigations. But lately, we have also seen high-handed and unreasonable approach of the revenue officers, which has resulted in a lot of controversies and litigation under the customs law. The government has contributed quite substantially in controversies and litigation, and I can say with reasonable conviction that most of the controversies involving customs laws raging presently are because of the unreasonable and unjustified actions of the central government. In such situation, the citizen is left with no alternative but to approach the courts of law, and that is why we have seen more and more writ petitions being filed before all the high courts in the country, including the Gujarat High Court. Let us take the cases of registered persons under the GST regime operating under the advance authorization scheme, where unnecessary and totally avoidable controversy and litigation has arisen. And this litigation is still going on before the Supreme Court. The advance authorization scheme has been in operation under the foreign trade policy for decades, and manufacturers had been importing raw materials duty-free under the authorizations, whereas the goods exported by them for fulfillment of export obligations involved in the authorizations were allowed to be cleared for export of payment of central excise duty prior to July 2017. Rebate of excise duty so paid on the exported goods was allowed under the central excise rules. You are all aware of it. Though goods imported under the authorizations were duty free, the manufacturers were procuring various other raw materials and consumables as well as services from the domestic market on payment of excise duty and service tax prior to July 2017. Sanvat credit of such locally procured materials and input services was used for paying excise duty on the goods exported under claim of rebate, and refund or rebate of such duties paid on the exported goods had been allowed till the end of June 2017, when the GST laws have been brought into operation. Upon introduction of GST laws, you are all aware that instead of additional customs duty, that is CVD, the countervailing duty, the government now charges IGST. But there is no change in the advance authorization scheme. But still, the government amended customs notifications that allowed exemption from custom duties for imports under advance authorization and laid down a condition in October 2017 that exemption from integrated tax and compensation cess would be admissible subject to pre-import condition. Pre-import condition means the manufacturer has to first import the inputs against an authorization. Such inputs should be used by the manufacturer for manufacture of the final products, and then such final products should be exported for fulfilling export obligations of that particular authorization. This is how pre-import condition was understood. Now, this amendment of pre-import condition affected almost all manufacturers in the country working under the advance authorization scheme, because it was virtually impossible for them to comply with pre-import condition. We all know that manufacture and export of goods for a regular exporter is like a cycle, and there is never any one-to-one correlation between one consignment of inputs imported under the authorization and its utilization for manufacture of final products exported for fulfillment of the export obligation. Realizing the futility of pre-import condition inserted in the customs notification in October 2017, the government deleted the condition of pre-import condition in January 2019 by declaring that the deletion of the condition was in public interest. It's very important to note. By deleting the condition, this pre-import condition, government declared that the deletion of the condition was in public interest. But the dispute remained for the intervening period of 13 or 14 months, October 2017 to January 2019. And since demand of IGST aggregating to crores of rupees was raised by the DRI against manufacturers of this for this limited period, the dispute landed up before the Gujarat High Court. By virtue of a detailed judgment, the High Court held that pre-import condition was ultra vires, the advance authorization scheme, and the High Court has struck down the condition. there was no benefit to the government by the pre-import condition, and therefore it was deleted also in January 2019. But still, however, this controversy is carried forward by the government, and the judgment of the Gujarat High Court is challenged before the Supreme Court, which is pending as of now. If the apex court were to ultimately decide that the High Court judgment was incorrect and the pre-import condition was valid and validly made by the government, then all the manufacturers of the country who operated under the advance authorization scheme during October 2017 to January 2019 would suffer a tremendous prejudice, because the custom officers would then demand from them crores of rupees with interest, though all such exporters have fulfilled their export obligations also for all advance authorizations. So the point I'm making is that though the government felt that a particular condition was not beneficial to the government nor to the exporters, and therefore in the public interest, the government deleted the condition after about 12 or 13 months of its operation. For the intervening period, a High Court held that this condition was ultra virus. But still, however, the government has not let this die the natural death, and the controversy is still carried forward to the highest court of the land. There is one more controversy related to the advance authorization scheme, for which also the customs authorities, including DRI, have been conducting nationwide investigation presently. This controversy is about payment of integrated tax on the exports made by the registered persons and refund of such integrated tax paid to them under Section 16 of the IGST Act. Honoring the wish of our Sri Abhishek Chopra, I am taking this Rule 16 controversy first, because as we all agree, it's the most raging controversy today. Like the controversy and litigation about pre-import condition, this question troubling practically all the exporters of the country who availed refund of integrated tax paid on their export is not only without any benefit to the government, but it is a retrograde step. I repeat, it's a retrograde step by the government for causing injury to the exporters and for affecting the exports of the country. Let us see the details of this controversy. As you are all aware, under Section 16 of the IGST Act, two options are given to the exporters. Two options. One is to supply goods or services for export under LUT or bond without payment of indicated tax and claim refund of unutilized input tax credit accumulated with the registered person. The second option, for which we are really concerned about, is to pay integrated tax on the export transactions and claim refund of such integrated tax paid by the exporter. The procedure for claiming refund of integrated tax is laid down under Rule 96 of the CGST rules. Mind well, Rule 96 is not the provision for, it's not the charging or enabling provision for refund, it's only the procedure. The enabling provision is Section 16 of the IGST Act. Now, all the registered persons importing certain inputs and materials under advance authorization also procure all other inputs, materials, and all input services from domestic suppliers. On such domestic procurements, GST is always paid by the supplier. Therefore, input tax credit, ITC, of such domestic procurements is taken by the registered person. Ordinarily, such ITC is utilized for paying integrated tax on the exported goods, and its refund is claimed under Section 16 of the IGST Act. This had been going on right from July 2017, when the GST laws have been brought into force. But the government first of all inserted Sub-Rule 10 in Rule 96. You are all aware that when Rule 96 for the procedure was enacted at that time, there were only 8 sub-rules. Sub-rule 10 was not there. So first of all, sub-rule 10 came to be added in Rule 96. Then this sub-rule 10 has been amended by the government from time to time. And retrospective effect to all such amendments is given right from October 2017. What is the amendment? The amendment is that a registered person claiming refund of integrated tax paid on exports should not have received supplies under certain notifications which are specified under this rule. Such specified notifications are for imports under Advance Authorization Scheme, procurements by export-oriented undertakings, and the like. So Advance Authorization Scheme procurements, EOU procurements, etc. are covered under Sub-Rule 10 of Rule 96. Now, because of such amendments by virtue of Sub-Rule 10 of Rule 96 of the CGST rules, which is meant only for laying down the procedure for refund, as I said, the effect is the refund of indicated tax paid to all registered persons on their exports are now being investigated, and refunds running into crores of rupees in each individual case are being recovered with interest and also penalty. The legal question arising is whether right of refund allowed under a section of the Act, which is the provision made by the Parliament, could be taken away by a rule made by the executives. Whether a rule meant for laying down only the procedure can have a provision which nullifies the entire provision of refund. Now, we professionals may be concerned about such legal issues, but the practical issue for the registered persons is about paying back refund already sanctioned in their favor by the revenue officers and the huge burden of such liability. Another controversy that has recently arisen is about the government's action of tinkering with merchandise exports from India scheme, MEIS scheme. I am sure that many of the members of the Chartered Accountants Association advise their clients on the export related schemes also. So many of the clients of many of the members today may be availing the benefit of MEIS also. You are all aware that MEIS rewards at a certain percentage of value of the exported goods was announced in the foreign trade policy from April 2015. Considering MEIS reward allowed at the rate of 3% or 5% and the like of the value of the goods, the manufacturer exporters have made sales contracts with overseas customers. While making such contracts, the Indian suppliers have agreed for a reduced price because MEIS reward was allowed by the government. Suddenly, on 1st September 2020, the Ministry of Commerce and Industry has issued a notification and laid down a condition that MEIS for one single exporter, please note this, it is for an individual exporter. The condition of 1st September 2020 notification is that MEIS for one single exporter for the exports made from 1st September to 31st December 2020, that is last 4 months of year 2020, that shall not exceed rupees 2 crores. Thus a ceiling or a cap of rupees 2 crores for an exporter is placed for the exports made in last 4 months of year 2020. The scheme is discontinued from 1st January 2021 altogether. Now the net result of this cap or the ceiling is that even if a person exports goods worth say 200 crores during September to December 2020, and if MEIS reward was otherwise admissible at the rate of 5% for such goods, and therefore he was entitled to rupees 10 crores MEIS on exports of 200 crores, but he would get only rupees 2 crores because of the cap by this notification. If the exports were of say 1000 crores in last 4 months of 2020, then instead of rupees 50 crores MEIS, the exporter would get only rupees 2 crores. And why this ceiling or cap? What is the reason? The Minister of Commerce has declared in various meetings and conferences held with trade and trade representatives and associations, chambers, etc., that the pandemic had an impact on the finances of the government and MEIS was a cash flow issue for them. Now imagine this, government declaring openly that we have no money and therefore even though you bring in scarce revenue, scarce foreign exchange, we will not give you the benefit or reward which we announced under the policy. So if such treatment to an exporter who brings a substantial reduced price to the overseas customers, keeping in mind MEIS reward allowed by the government, and no such reward in excess of rupees 2 crores would now be paid to him. Now, this is not the end of the matter. Even for the exports made under MEIS prior to September 2020, when there was no cap or no ceiling, what is the position? The government portal is refusing to accept the claims online. All these claims are to be uploaded on the portal online. The claimants are informed in writing from the portal that MEIS application would be accepted after adequate funds are available. So from 1st September to December 2020, ceiling or cap of 2 crores, irrespective of the actual exports and the MEIS otherwise admissible to the exporter. For the prior period, whatever MEIS is earned would not be paid because the government has no funds. When the government would accept the applications, nobody knows. Now this controversy is really needless because the government cannot treat exporters in unfair manner and large-scale exporters cannot be deprived of MEIS reward by putting an unreasonable ceiling or cap of rupees 2 crores per exporter. This is also a violation of Article 14 of the Constitution because it's unreasonable, arbitrary, unjustified. Since reward of crores of rupees is involved in this controversial matter, litigation has commenced before the courts of law and nobody would know how much time would be taken before this controversy and litigation are resolved finally. Controversies and consequently litigation arise because clear provisions of the customs law are tinkered with by the government by issuing wrong and oppressive circulars from time to time. Ultimately, the courts of law have to intervene in such matters. A classical example is in respect of Section 149 of the Customs Act. Many a times it so happens that the exporter may not declare on the export documents like shipping bill or export invoice that the export was under claim of one or the other export benefits scheme of the government. Sometimes a wrong claim or incorrect claim may have been declared on the export documents. An actually applicable scheme may not have been declared on the export documents. Claims like drawback may not have been declared on shipping bill, or DEPB instead of DEEC may have been declared. These are just inadvertent errors or unintended mistakes while preparing the documents. Sometimes the exporter may not be even aware about admissibility of export benefits under a particular scheme, and therefore also the benefit may not have been claimed on the export documents. But after the goods are exported to foreign country, the exporter may become wiser. And in such circumstances, Section 149 of the Customs Act allows a proper officer of customs to amend the documents so that the genuine exporter may not lose the export benefits, which are otherwise allowed to him by the government. In fact, all of you must be aware that the shipping bill and the export invoice must carry the claim of the exporter if any claim under any of the schemes is lodged by the exporter. If on the document the claim was not declared, then the custom people and therefore the DGFT people would not allow you the export benefit. Now, in such cases, Section 149 comes into play, and the custom officer can allow amendment of the shipping bill or the export invoice or any other document like bill of entry. The only condition of Section 149 is that such amendment should be possible on the basis of the documents in existence at the time of clearance of the goods. No time limit for allowing amendment of documents is laid down under this provision. So there is no time limit. Only condition is that any amendment sought should be possible on the basis of the documents in existence when the goods were cleared for export or import. In various cases, the exporters have requested for amendment by converting a shipping bill for benefit of one scheme to another, or for claiming drawback which was left out from being mentioned in the export documents. And the like cases are arising. In all such cases, the required document could be made, required amendment could be made on the basis of the documentary evidence in existence at the time of clearance of the goods, because there would not be any dispute about the description and classification of the goods, quantity of the goods, value of the goods, and therefore no dispute about the quantum of export benefit available to the exporter. But the government issued a circular. By this circular, the government laid down a condition that such amendment or conversion of any export document from one scheme to another was permissible only if a request or application was made for such amendment within 3 months from clearance of the goods for export. Now, apart from the fact that 3 months is a very short period, it is noteworthy that no power was conferred upon the government for laying down any time limit for allowing amendment of export documents. Legitimate export benefits of large number of citizens and exporters were denied only on the ground that their request or application was made more than 3 months after the export. This was a needless controversy. And export benefits otherwise admissible to a citizen should not be denied on such technical approach of time bar or limitation, only because the government issued a circular, though there was no time limit under the provision made by the parliament. Recently, the Gujarat High Court has struck down the time limit of 3 months laid down by the government under the circular. The High Court has held that such time limit was ultra vires Section 149 of the Customs Act, because that section did not give any power to the government for laying down such time limit. The High Court has held that such time limit is unenforceable. In that case, export benefits of drawback with interest are allowed by the High Court, even though drawback was claimed 1 year after the goods were exported in that case. So this is a classical example of cases where the government creates controversies by issuing circulars when there is no such requirement, and then ultimately it results in litigation before the court of law. Most of the disputes and litigation arise on account of reassessment of concluded transactions sought to be made by the customs officers. The goods imported into India are allowed to be cleared for home consumption by assessing classification of the goods, value of the goods, applicable rate of duty, and the amount of duties payable. Once the assessment is made by the proper custom officer, the importers would pay the duties so assessed by the officer. And then they bona fide believe that the import transaction was concluded. But later on, the custom officers may change their view about the classification or value or exemption granted or any such matter affecting the quantum of duties payable. And then the entire gamut of investigation, inquiry, show cause notice, adjudication, appeal, etc. would follow. This is normally in case of imports. But in case of exports also, similar controversies often arise. While exporting the goods under claim of any export benefits like DEPB, MEIS, etc., the proper customs officer would make assessment and then licensing authorities like DGFT under the Foreign Trade Act would grant the export benefit based on such assessment made by the custom officers. But later on, the custom authorities may change their view about classification or value, etc., of the exported goods and initiate proceedings for denial and recovery of export benefits already paid to the exporters. It is generally seen by all of us that such controversies in respect of concluded assessments is raised by a specific agency, namely DRI. Disregarding the long-standing practice of assessment in a particular manner followed all over the country, DRI authorities have a tendency to raise controversies and initiate proceedings. Recently, a case of import of a textile machine called fully fashioned high-speed knitting machine is a raging controversy in the country. These machines, namely fully fashioned high-speed knitting machines, are being imported in India for last 20 years. And textile manufacturers located at various places like Surat, Mumbai, Delhi NCR, Amritsar, Panipat have imported more than 1,000 machines during this long period of about 2 decades under this description, that is fully fashioned high-speed knitting machines. Reduced rate of customs duty was allowed at all customs stations where such machines were imported under EPCG scheme and the export obligations by manufacturing textile goods and exporting them for EPCG licenses have also been fulfilled. But now the DRI authorities have formed a view that the machines were not fully fashioned knitting machines. They were ordinary high-speed knitting machines according to the DRI. Therefore, reduced rate of customs duty was not admissible according to DRI. The DRI may be right. In terms of technology, such machines may not be fully fashioned knitting machines. But the point is that proper customs officers have accepted the machines as fully fashioned knitting machines for last 20 years. And therefore, could it now be alleged against the importers that they deliberately misclassified the goods and committed violation of the Customs Act and also the EPCG scheme with mala fide intention? In regard to exports also, a similar controversy is raging presently. Various domestic manufacturers of agrochemicals have been exporting their goods as pesticides. And such goods have been accepted as pesticide by central excise authorities for local clearances and by custom officers for the exports for last about 20-25 years. The government has allowed MEIS benefit from 1st April 2015 for pesticides at the rate of 3% of value of the exported goods. MEIS for other agrochemicals in the nature of insecticides, fungicides, etc. is 2%. So please appreciate, for pesticides 3% MEIS, for insecticides, fungicides, and herbicides 2%. Since all such agrochemicals were assessed under central excise and also customs till 2015 when MEIS was introduced as pesticides, the manufacturers have claimed 3% MEIS for their exports from April 2015 onwards, which was allowed also by the customs as well as the DGFT authorities. But now the DRI authorities have swung into action and cases are made out against all manufacturers exporters of such goods that they misclassified their goods as pesticides for availing 1% excess MEIS reward. Now, apart from the fact that these goods were accepted and assessed by all revenue officers as pesticides for last 20 years or more, technically, pesticide is a wider expression. Pesticide is a chemical used to control or eliminate all pests. Insecticides, herbicides, fungicides, and rodenticides are 4 types of pesticides. Now, in this situation, would it be fair to the exporters if their concluded transactions of exports were reopened and actions for recovering 1% MEIS with interest and penalty were allowed on allegation of misclassification by them? All such controversies involving reassessments under the customs law are always for the extended period of limitation, that is 5 years, not the normal period of limitation. In such cases, if there was any wrong assessment, but practice of such assessment was going on for last several years, then change in the assessment should be made prospectively. But the DRI authorities do not think so. And the government has also not intervened in such matters for saving the exporters of harassment and prejudice arising out of DRI investigations and reassessment of concluded imports and exports. The result is unnecessary litigation. When we are talking about the agency of DRI, we must consider the controversy whether the Directorate of Revenue Intelligence Officer is the proper customs officer or not. This controversy about the power and jurisdiction of the DRI officers was raging on for about 15 years in past. It has been recently resolved by the Supreme Court against the government. The very recent judgment of the Supreme Court in Canon India Private Limited, delivered on 9th March 2021, that is last week only, is expected to deliver a solid body blow to the government and a huge sigh of relief to the trade. Since DRI is an agency having all India jurisdiction, investigation in any customs related cases against any importer located anywhere in the country is conducted by DRI, irrespective of the port of import or export. Having all India jurisdiction, DRI is not having any constraint of territorial jurisdiction. The practice of DRI investigation has been that after concluding their investigation, a so-cause notice under Section 28 of the Customs Act would be issued by a DRI officer. And the adjudication of such so-cause notice would be ordinarily undertaken by the customs officer in charge of the port or the customs station where the import or export took place. Such so-cause notice would be for demanding customs duties with other proposals like interest, penalty, confiscation, etc. But now, in judgment of Canon India Private Limited, a 3-judges bench of the Supreme Court has held that DRI officer was not the proper officer of customs for the purpose of Section 28 of the Act. Kindly mark this. There are 2 expressions under the Customs Act: customs officer and the proper customs officer. So DRI may be a custom officer. But for the purpose of section 28, which is the provision like our section 73 of the CGST Act, show cause notice for tax not levied, short levied, etc., customs duty short levied, short paid, etc. For that purpose, only the proper officer of customs can issue a show cause notice. So the Supreme Court 3 judges bench now holds that DRI officer was not the proper officer of customs for the purpose of section 28 of the Customs Act. Therefore, any show cause notice issued by a DRI officer for reassessment of goods and for demanding customs duty was invalid and without jurisdiction. It is held in this judgment that only the proper custom officer possessed the jurisdiction for reassessment and demanding customs duty, whereas all show cause notices issued by DRI officers for such purpose were illegal, and therefore even the adjudication orders made on such illegal show cause notices were without jurisdiction and liable to be set aside. The effect of this judgment is that all cases where a show cause notice was issued by any officer of DRI for reassessment of imported or exported goods and for demanding differential duties, such proceedings would be wholly illegal. Any liabilities including demand of duty, interest, penalty, confiscation, and redemption fine, etc., confirmed by any custom officer pursuant to such show cause notice would also be illegal and without jurisdiction. It is judicially held in several other cases that a show cause notice cannot be severed or bifurcated in respect of various proposals made in the show cause notice. Therefore, if a show cause notice under section 28 of the Customs Act was issued by the DRI officer for reassessment and demanding differential customs duty, then not only such proposals but also other proposals like penalty, confiscation of goods, etc., would also be illegal and without jurisdiction, because a combined and consolidated show cause notice cannot be severed or bifurcated for a few of the proposals like penalty, confiscation, and redemption fine for saving such proposals. And any orders made on such show cause notice for duty, interest, penalty, redemption fine, etc., would be without jurisdiction for all the proposals, for all the liabilities. Even the order cannot be saved for certain proposals or certain liabilities like penalty, redemption fine, etc. Till now, even today, the DRI officers are issuing show cause notices invoking section 28 of the Customs Act, and therefore all such show cause notices and any orders passed on such notices would now be unenforceable, which would result in a huge loss to the government, because no liability under such orders or such show cause notices can now be enforced by the government. Imagine, even if there was a genuine case of smuggling or a confirmed case of misclassification or any case of real illegality by the importer or the exporter, but still no action can be taken against such importer or exporter if the show cause notice was issued by the DRI officers invoking section 28 of the Customs Act. Now, like other controversies, this controversy is also resolved only by the court of law finally. One more controversy which is going on for a long time and we have not seen any end to it is about the conflict between the actions of the licensing authorities, that is DGFT, and the customs authorities. Under the foreign trade policy, licenses or authorizations are issued by the DGFT. Goods covered under such licenses or authorizations are allowed to be imported free of import duties. Under the Customs Act, various notifications are issued for allowing exemption to goods covered under such licenses. The controversy arises when the customs authorities assessing the import documents like a bill of entry make out a case that the goods were not exempt, whereas the importer would claim the exemption because the goods were covered under the license or authorization issued by the DGFT. The controversy is whether the customs officer can decide whether the license for allowing duty-free import was rightly and properly issued by the DGFT, or the custom officer must allow the exemption if the license covered the imported goods. Time and again, such cases arise because of the adamant attitude of the customs officers and their false notion that they have the jurisdiction to allow or deny exemption from customs duty even when the imported goods were covered under a valid license issued by the DGFT. Many a times the courts of law are called upon to pronounce upon this controversy, which could be easily avoided if it was clarified by the government that customs officers shall not deny or object to the exemption if the goods were covered by a valid import license. Sometimes controversies involving interest of genuine persons are also resolved by the government, but such occurrences are very rare. Cases where the government has taken some proactive step to resolve the controversy in favor of the trade or in favor of the citizen are normally not noticed. One such instance is about Section 28 AAA of the Customs Act. For safeguarding the interest of bona fide buyers of any import license from the open market, the state has taken a positive action in May 2012, which requires mentioning here. Exporters are allowed export benefits like DEPB, MEIS scrip, etc. Such credits or scrips are freely transferable, and therefore the exporters who are awarded benefits of such scrips or licenses, they sell them regularly in the market. A buyer of the scrip or license in the market can then utilize such scrip or credit for paying custom duties by debiting the passbook credit or the scrip. In some cases, the original exporter had committed some irregularity or illegality, and therefore benefits like DPB credit or MEIS scrip or the like were wrongly granted to them. But they sold such benefit to someone in the market. When such wrongly granted scrip was sold, the bona fide buyer did not have any notice about any irregularity or illegality by the original exporter. The buyer of the scrip or DPB passbook or such license utilized it for paying customs duties on the goods imported by him. But the law has been that the importer has to pay custom duties on the goods imported by him, and therefore the bona fide buyers of such scrips were fastened with liability of customs duty for the goods imported by them when it transpired that the original exporter who was given such scrip or license had committed illegality, and therefore the scrip was invalid. The perpetrator of illegality, that is the original exporter, would then go scot-free because he did not utilize the scrip or license for any import, though he had committed the illegality or irregularity for securing export benefit. Therefore, provision of Section 28 AAA has been brought on the statute book by the state, and in cases where any document like an import license or a passbook or scrip was found to have been obtained illegally or fraudulently, then under this provision, Section 28 AAA, the liability for paying custom duties on goods imported against such scrip or license is that of the original exporter who obtained the license or the scrip illegally or fraudulently. The controversy about liability of the bona fide buyer of a license or a scrip without any notice of illegality or irregularity is thus resolved by the state itself, and the interest of such bona fide buyer is safeguarded. Apart from the controversies about importability of the goods, admissibility of the exemption for the imported goods, and classification of or valuation of the imported goods for duty assessment, the action which hurts a citizen the most is withholding clearance of the goods by the custom officers. Despite the instructions of the government not to detain goods brought to a custom station for export, the officers do not issue let export order, that is LEO, in many cases. And the result is that the goods meant for export would be lying at the customs station. The overseas buyer would be demanding for the delivery, and the reputation and goodwill of the Indian exporter would be dented when export cannot be made timely. For imported goods also, many a times bills of entry are not assessed and the imported goods are not cleared for home consumption. In such cases, demurrage, detention charges, port charges, godown charges, etc. have to be incurred, which would be an additional cost to the businessman. Though the custom officers are expected to take a pragmatic view and allow clearance of the goods by taking a bond or undertaking or any reasonable security for safeguarding the interest of the government, such pragmatic view is very often not taken. The only result is harassment to the businessmen and monetary loss which cannot be compensated. Speed and fast movement are now the rule of the new world, which were not contemplated in 1962 when the Customs Act was framed by the Parliament. But no practical provisions or guidelines are issued for avoiding such situations, although no one benefits in the situation where the goods are just held back at the customs station without any use to anyone. There are many other controversies that have resulted in litigation involving units operating in special economic zones. For SEZ operations also, the Customs Act is a supplementary statute, and therefore certain provisions of the customs law are applicable to SEZ operations also. But it is not possible to discuss all such controversies and litigations here because of the time constraint. While concluding this discussion, I would like to go back to the beginning of this deliberation where I referred to the objects of 1962 Act. The smuggling activities of 1962 and a few decades thereafter are almost non-existent now. There is hardly any smuggling now. Liberalization in import-export is the policy adopted by the government for last 3 decades, and therefore very few commodities are now prohibited for import or export. But the powers conferred upon the customs officers for search, seizure, arrest are not diluted. Such wide powers for investigation, arrest, etc. are not needed now, though they were necessary in 1962 and a few years thereafter. Search of any premises can be caused by a gazetted officer of customs if he has a reason to believe that the contraband goods were stored or secreted in the premises. Any person can be examined and inspected by a gazetted officer of customs if he has a reason to believe that he had concealed any contraband on his body, on his person, or that he had information which was necessary for any inquiry or investigation. Most drastically, any officer of customs authorized by the commissioner can arrest any person if he has a reason to believe that such person was involved in any smuggling activity, or he had evaded customs duty, or he had committed any offense under the Customs Act. Now, what is this expression reason to believe? It's not defined anywhere. It should be really the objective appreciation of the facts and circumstances of each case, but in practice, the reason to believe is always a subjective satisfaction of the officer and not an objective view of the matter by him. For wrong or unjustified search or seizure or even arrest of a person, no action can be taken against the concerned officer because the custom officer enjoys immunity under the Customs Act. Maybe such powers were required in 1962 to tackle the economic conditions and the general situation in the country, and also to prevent and eliminate smuggling. But now, in 21st century, such wide and drastic powers have to be diluted, and the fundamental right of protection of personal liberty of a citizen, Article 21 of the Constitution, needs to be placed on a higher pedestal. No controversy or litigation is more important than a controversy and litigation involving personal liberty of a citizen. Therefore, a time has come for the state to revisit provisions of the customs laws regarding search, seizure, arrest, etc., and also about the powers of the customs officers for reassessment of concluded transactions of imports and exports. Many controversies and litigation could be avoided, and time, efforts, energy, and money of the citizens as well as the state in litigating about such controversies could be used for better purposes if this happens. I thank you all for allowing me to put my thoughts and views before you. Now, subject to the permission of the chairman, the moderator, and the coordinator of this session, we can have a free discussion on the issues of general interest under the customs law. Once again, I thank you all and hand over the session to the chairman and the moderator of this session. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Sir, we have certain questions, one or two
Yes.
questions. First question is with regard to that now currently, as you have mentioned, that the DRI officer does not have the power of a proper officer. So this rule is also applicable in case of the GST, that the DGGI officer cannot also issue show cause notice?
Now, see, in section 28, the expression is the proper officer, whereas
Yes,
our GST, it is
Yes.
a GST officer. So
Okay.
therefore, there is a difference. If you see the Supreme Court judgment, what they have laid emphasis is on the word the. The Supreme Court has said
True.
that the
The.
proper officer means not any officer. In that context, but see, in fact, even in the past, for central excise so-called notices, DGCEI, like DRI and customs, they were issuing so-called notices. Prima facie, I feel that this principle may not apply in GST and also in central excise and service tax for the period before July 2017. But it can be examined.
Oh, okay. Okay, sir. Okay.
Sir,
Abhishek bhai, next question.
yes. Sir, regarding Rule 9610, suppose the exporter has violated Rule 9610 and he want to pay back the refund amount. Can he claim the credit of such a rejected refund of that amount which is paid to the credit of government?
Abhishek, in fact, this issue is being discussed in my office also every day because, someone or the other comes with this type of investigation. There are two or, I think this 96 sub rule 10 is the issue which is troubling many of your members also.
Yes, sir.
So let me just take some more time on that. Apart from the issue that 9610, according to me, is ultra virus, we don't go into the legality. See, there are two options. I have suggested to some of the clients who come to me for one more option also. One option could be that, see, the whole controversy of this IGST refund not being available now has arisen because the concerned importers under the advance authorization scheme did not pay IGST, right? See, if you don't pay IGST, you import certain goods under the advance license, and then you manufacture goods, export them, and you pay the integrated tax out of some other ITC, and you claim refund. This is what has happened. Now, DRI Kolkata and now DRI Ahmedabad, what they are saying is that this was wrong because you have availed supplies under the notifications meant for either EOU or advance authorization, etc. One option could be that you apply for reassessment of the bills of entry. You make an application for assessing integrated tax on the imported goods. It could be done. If they don't reassess, you can go to High Court for that. But if you ultimately suppose your bill of entry is reassessed, integrated tax is assessed on the imported goods, you pay with interest today. That amount would be much less than the amount of refund that you have already taken, and now they are disputing. Now there also this question which you raised comes into play. That suppose today your reassessment is allowed either directly by the customs or through the High Court's intervention. You pay the integrated tax on the imported goods, whether you can claim the ITC or not. Because ordinarily, if you had paid at that time, you would have taken the ITC.
Yes,
Nobody
yes.
would have objected. The only problem today is that you would be seeking reassessment of 2017, 2018, or 2019 imports, for which your returns, etc., may now have been finalized. There, I believe that even though law may not permit, we can go to the High Court, and I am sure High Court would take a pragmatic and equitable view that if you were not asked to pay at the relevant time, because even the custom officers, GST officers, nobody knew at that time that this would be the amendment of Rule 96, retrospective amendment, etc., etc. This would be the effect of the amendments. And therefore, if today you are paying the integrated tax, or as you said, you are paying back the refund that you have taken, then the ITC should be made available of the amount equal to that. But it's a matter of litigation, but I feel that you have a very strong case on that. Even for integrated tax, if paid on the imported goods, on reassessment, or the refund which you may pay back now and claim it's because it will be ultimately restoring the ITC. See, the refund is only the amount of ITC which you utilized for paying integrated tax on the exported goods. Basically, you have paid out of your ITC only.
ITC.
So the moment you pay back the refund, your ITC gets restored. It may be a matter of
Sir,
litigation, but it's a good case for arguing and getting the relief.
Sir, as you have mentioned that in case if we go for the reassessment and in reassessment, if the bill of in bill of entry, if we IGST,
Yes.
so as I feel that in case if we go back to the section 16.4 that restrict the credit on the basis of time, that after September next period September month return you cannot claim the previous credits. So in that they have mentioned only for the invoice, they have not mentioned for the bill of entry. So can we claim the benefit that the section 16.4 of CGST Act, it only restrict the time period for the invoice, not for the bill of entry. So we can claim that particular credit of IGST that we have paid on the reassessment of bill of entry.
Yeah, it will be one ground or one argument in your favor. But see, ultimately, you may have to go to the High Court even for reassessment. Because you are all aware that once there is a DRI inquiry, even the custom officers in charge of your imports at the relevant time would not readily agree for reassessment. They would say that we cannot reassess the bill of entry filed by you in 2017 or 18 or 19. So therefore, ultimately, it will be a matter of litigation. But what you are saying is, yes, one more ground that in any case, section 16 also does not restrict the availment of ITC. But even on equitable ground, I am sure that the court would help the trade because you are paying today with interest. The reason is that the controversy has now arisen. At the relevant time, nobody knew about this. It was a mistake of all concerned. So therefore, it's a good case. And what you are saying about bill of entry is, yes, one more ground, one more issue you can raise.
Sir, in the same case, 9610, either we go for reassessment of bill of entry or we choose to pay the export refund which is claimed. In both the cases, we have to pay the interest to the government.
Yes. Interest, yes, in both the cases.
In both there is no remedy to that.
No. Interest always follows the liability of principal. See, there can be a waiver of penalty, but interest can never be waived. You are all chartered accountants, you know, in income tax, even interest is compensatory. So once you have used the government's money, you must compensate the government. No waiver.
Okay, barabar.
So sir, we only have this particular two questions. We do not have any other question. So on behalf of the Ahmedabad branch of WIRC, sir, we are extremely grateful and thankful to you for sparing your valuable time and enlightening us with regard to the recent controversy and the litigation in custom as well as in connection with the GST, sir. So thank you so much, sir, for the same. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Pleasure
Thank
is
you, sir.
mine. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Can I leave now?
Yeah, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Abhishek.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.